everyone, welcome to today's vlog. It is currently just a little past 8 on Wednesday, December 8th, and as you can see here, I am happy to show you guys my baby. This is George Danger Radke. He is a 7-year-old Dotson Jack Russell mix. I have had him since he was 8 weeks old, and I adopted him from the Yuma Humane Society via PetSmart when I was living in Arizona. So George has been with me since 2014, and he is such a little cutie, little handsome man. Yes, you are. Yeah, that's my little buddy. Anyway, so we're gonna do something a little different with today's vlog. So last year, and I'll be sure to put it in the cards, I did a video. Oh, do you want to lay down? Here, you can lay right here. You want to lay here? Where do you want to lay? He doesn't really like to lay on me, so we'll just put you right here. Okay. Now that he's situated, you might see him on camera again, you might not. But regardless, last year when I did Vlogmas, I did an Ask Emily, right? So put it on my Instagram, and I basically answered everyone's questions that you guys had. So I did basically that this time around, but I also got some questions about, and I did also preface this because I always get questions when I tell people where I'm from. They're always like, wait, you're from Iowa? Like, you were born there? And I'm like, yeah, like born and raised. My family still lives here. Like my whole family, basically. So I figured what I would do is I'm just gonna go ahead and talk to you guys just a little bit about basically like what it is like to live in Iowa and be black, specifically a black woman. So just I had one question that came through, and it was, where are your people from? Meaning like my family, right? So as for my family, so I'll start with my mom. My mom is actually from Des Moines as well, but my grandmother and grandfather are, my grandmother and grandfather are actually from Jackson, Mississippi. So my mom had told me this story when I was younger, but basically what happened was my grandfather was walking with my great-grandmother when he was young, and my great-grandmother living in Jackson, Mississippi in the segregated South, he was born in the 1930s, so you can imagine, right? Anyway, she was walking with her son, and they saw a young boy around my grandfather's age hanging from a tree. And basically that prompted my great-grandmother to, George, do you want to lay down? Lay down. Basically that prompted my great-grandmother to look to get her son out of the South. And I think a couple of months later, they had heard about Iowa, being kind of like an up-and-coming area where there was a lot of jobs, a lot of work, and some in more favorable conditions for black people. So she moved my grandpa up here. And my grandpa, I do believe, like at some point he went back to Mississippi because he met my grandmother. And by that time they had family in Iowa. So they did end up having, I think, 3 children. So my 2 aunts and an uncle of mine, they had them in Mississippi, and then the rest of the kids they actually had in Des Moines. So my mom is born and raised here in Iowa. She is an Iowa girl. And yeah, so there's that. And on my mother's side, I have 5 aunts and 2 uncles. So my mom is one of 8. She is from a very large family. The majority of my aunts and uncles do live here in the Des Moines area. I have an aunt in Omaha, and I have an uncle up in Minneapolis. As for my dad, so my dad is actually born in South Carolina. And he actually spent his elementary years in South Carolina, but his family actually migrated up north, and they actually went to New York. So my dad is a New Yorker, technically. So my dad went to middle school and high school in New York. My dad is from the Bronx, and how he got to Iowa was through a football scholarship. So I don't know if I've ever told you guys this, but my dad, he went to Simpson. That's the college I went to and I worked at, and he graduated spring of 78. And the cool thing is that me and my dad, we actually graduated from Simpson 30 years to the day. So that was like a really cool milestone. And we're both Simpson alums, and I am a legacy. But my dad basically came out here to play football with a bunch of his friends. At the time, my dad actually went to, if you guys have probably heard of it, he went to DeWitt Clinton High School, which back in the 70s was an all-boys school. And that's actually the same school that Cardi B went to. So a little side note. Anyway, so my dad actually came out here to play football for Simpson, in which he did. He also got his degree in physical education, and he minored in African American studies. And basically, while he was out here, he met my mom, and he's been here ever since. So my dad came to Iowa in the early 70s, and he has never left. My dad has 2 brothers and 3 sisters. They all live on the East Coast. The majority of them live in New York. Excuse me. I have an aunt in New Jersey, and then I have an uncle in North Carolina. He's in Charlotte, I do believe. Anyway, but yeah, so on my dad's side, we're the only people out here from that side of the family. Actually, no, I have a cousin in Minneapolis from my East Coast fam. And then as for my mom's family, basically we're all here in Des Moines, but we also do have family in South Carolina. I've got family in Florida. I've got family in Mississippi, and also in Texas, California, and I got family in Nebraska. That's my aunt. And then there's a place that I'm missing. Anyway, I've got family all over the South. And then, of course, like I said, I got family in New York. I got family in Connecticut, and a couple other places. So yeah, so that is basically how, where my people are from. So there's that. Another question that I have is hair care. So, being from Iowa, you know, and it's one of those things too where, like, if you're from here, you definitely like know where to go and what to get. And it's really one of those things where it's just a network. So a lot of the times, a lot of people find their stylists, especially now through social media. Back in the day, it used to be word of mouth. So basically, like, you could go to church, you can go out, whatever, you see somebody's hair is looking good, you're like, oh, wait a minute, sis, where did you get your hair done? They give you the stylist, and then you just kind of build up that relationship. That's kind of how I found my current stylist, Ashley. Basically, I saw another girl's hair, and I was like, where did she get your hair done? And I've been seeing Ashley ever since. So yeah, a lot of it though is word of mouth, but I do think that because of social media, a lot of the Black stylists here in the Des Moines area, they have definitely been utilizing that to network and you know, really bring up their clientele. Also, like, for example, with Ashley, my stylist, she's actually from Chicago. So you do see like a lot of stylists coming from, you know, Atlanta, coming up from Houston, coming up even from like Kansas City and like St. Louis, and then also Chicago. And they just really build up a really awesome network here. There's some really awesome stylists here in the Des Moines area. So I will tell you that it is up and coming. When I was growing up, you did not have this many Black stylists around. Actually, for the majority of my lifetime, my mother did my hair. So I used to rock braids when I was younger, you know, and that was all my mom. My mom used to do all my relaxers back when I used to relax my hair when I was younger. And that's really how a lot of it was. Like, it was either your mom or a close friend that you knew was a beautician, and then you just kind of went from there. There are a couple of Black hair care supply stores here in the Des Moines area, which is a godsend. So yeah, like it's definitely like a lot more than it was like when I was younger. Another question that I did have is, do people consider going out of state for college? Meaning like Black people. Do you know or consider HBCUs? That's actually a really good question. So as for my friend group, so I have a relatively pretty close-knit friend group, me and all my friends. I mean, you met Brittany the other day, but me and all my friends, we basically all grew up in the Des Moines area. Our parents are all from here, and in some instances, like, our parents either went to school with one another, or like our parents went to school with like a brother or sister or uncle or something like that. But for the most part, in my immediate friend group, actually none of us went to HBCUs, but we did know about them, right? So, and I'm not saying like we knew about them because of like Stomp the Yard or anything like that. No. You know, I will say that my friend group, we were we all knew that we wanted to go to college. None of us left the state. A couple of us did, but the majority of us did stay here in Iowa. Some of us did go up to Iowa State University. One of us went to Iowa, a couple went to Drake, and then a few of us went down to Simpson. I just think that for the most part though, like we wanted to stay close to our families. I won't even speak for them. I know for myself, my sister actually went to an HBCU. So my sister was actually my first kind of window into what a historical Black college or university could actually look like. My sister went to Xavier University, and she really enjoyed her experience down there, and she ended up, living in the South and living in New Orleans and also later in Jackson, Mississippi before she passed. But, I would say that at least for me, it was never a thought for me to leave state for college, and I never really thought that like I was smart enough to get into an HBCU. So that's why like I never really considered it. My sister had like a 4.3 GPA. She ended up getting like a 35 on her ACT. Olivia was flipping brilliant. So for her, absolutely go the HBCU route. And she was just so smart. But I had to work hard for my 3.0 GPA that I had because school did not really come all that easily for me. So, but yeah, I mean, we were smart enough though to do our research and really figure out where it is that we wanted to go. But like I said, I never really wanted to go to HBCU. And I think it was because once I knew, that I wanted to stay close to home and I could share that connection with my father of going to the same school as him and getting a great education, then that was just what I wanted. But I will say also that, I have always wanted to at least pledge a Black sorority, because obviously they didn't have none of those at Simpson. So, and it's good to know too that, I could essentially still pledge as a grad. So, there are definitely those options, but again, I know for myself, I wanted to stay close to home, and there are no HBCUs in Iowa, so there you go. Another question is Black cultural institutions in Iowa, such as the African American Museum in Cedar Rapids. Didn't you learn about those things growing up? No. Not because for a lack of like ignorance, but I didn't know it existed, like literally, So there is an African American Museum here in Iowa, yes, and it's actually in Cedar Rapids, which is about 2 hours east of Des Moines. I did not find out about this place until I started traveling the state for work, and this was when I was a recruiter at Simpson. So, but I do think that now there has been a shift, and I think it's just because like now here in Des Moines, you're seeing like increased populations of Black people, and they're actually coming from various different locations, and they're really kind of like setting the tone for the Des Moines of the future and really what it looks like for the Black populations here. I will tell you that like growing up though, like we were a pretty close-knit community to where you knew who people were. So like when I was growing up, especially when I was in high school, I would have someone literally look dead at me in the face, look at my nose and be like, oh, you have to be a Horton because it's my mother's maiden name and I look just like my mom. So, and it's still kind of that thing, where like you hear certain last names and you're like, oh my God, I'm pretty sure I went to high school with them. Or, my friend of a friend, is married to that cousin. It's just all of those different things, right? But I will say that like we were like a pretty close-knit community like when I was a kid. But it is really nice to see just so many people now coming in and really bringing in various different elements from their upbringings and their regions and what we have going on. So it's definitely nice to see that shift. And yeah, and those families, that like, for example, like the Hortons, like we're still around. So, that's pretty cool. And then I had another question that I thought was really interesting, and a really good friend of mine from Wisconsin asked this question. So I'll just go ahead and I'll say what it is. And again, I've got my iPad. So the question is, do you think you've had it easier or harder coming from the rural Midwest than a Black female in places like New York or San Diego? How about in comparison to southern states, based on what you've read or from anyone you may know from those areas? So, granted, and this is actually going to be the last question that I'm going to answer for now. So, that's like a really good question, and I will say that while I had a really awesome support system of just really awesome people growing up, I've got really great friends that are all strong, beautiful Black women. And I've really been able to meet a lot of really awesome professional Black people along the way. Growing up, it was still really hard. You know, the majority of the schools that I went to, you know, except, well, basically like elementary school and then high school and middle school was totally different. But elementary school specifically, you know, 1st through 5th grade, I was always the only Black kid in class. I didn't have my first actual like Black teacher until middle school. I didn't see Black people in administrative roles until middle school. So it was still really hard to go to school, be the only one, and anytime something bad happened, and I was like a good kid, anytime something bad happened, it always got turned to me. You know, if I would wear my hair differently. So like I remember I started wearing braids when I was in the 2nd grade. And I had a girl come up behind me and take my hair from the back and like go like this and, you know, say, "Go horsey go." Like my hair were reins. You know, and you can't, I remember saying to my teacher, like, she did this and it was, "Oh, she's just messing around. She didn't mean anything." So I feel like I've always had to set what are now called boundaries. I have been setting those since I was a little kid. And it's hard, you know. I'm sure that there are other Black females that can attest to this, especially if you grew up in a Midwestern town like mine that is predominantly white, and, you know, you are basically, you know, the pepper flake and the buttermilk, right? Would I say that Black women from more urban areas have it easier? That's kind of a tough call. I would say that in some aspects probably, because there is more of that like sense of you're not always the only one, and there's probably, you know, 4 or 5 other Black kids that you can definitely vibe with and understand. But I was always the only one. I didn't start going to a more diverse school until middle school. I went to Callanan here in the Des Moines area, and it is actually like kind of like near the heart of downtown. And there were so many kids of color of different, and not only like Black and white kids, but I was like finally starting to go to school with like Mexican kids and Puerto Rican kids and Asian kids and Filipino kids and you know, Bosnian kids even, you know, so it just really reiterated that I'm not the only one. And I got to learn about a lot of different cultures growing up, which was really awesome once I hit the 6th grade. My high school, I always like to say Roosevelt was 50% white, 50% everything else. And it was great. And again, you know, there was so much cultural diversity going on that it definitely did put a lot of things into perspective, and it made my middle school and high school years a lot easier, because I will tell you right now, elementary school for me was worse than middle school. And middle school is when you're really awkward. I could handle middle school because that's when I met my friends. But elementary school was really, really hard. My parents, they did the best they could. They sent me to one of the best schools in the city at the time because we were living on the south side of town. But it was still really hard. And then there was another part of that question. I don't think I answered the whole thing. But yeah, and like I said, you know, I think for kids like in southern states or like in bigger cities like New York or San Diego or even LA, you know, I just think it really kind of, for those pockets, it really just kind of all depends on where you are. But it didn't really matter where I was. Like I'm always just like right there. So I will say that the majority of my life, though, especially now that I'm a working adult, you know, a lot of the times, not so much at Iowa State, but previous to this, you know, I've always like been the only Black person in my department, you know, and, or, you know, the only, you know, person of color that has a college degree, or, just things like that. Right. So, or even, you know, now I'm the only one that doesn't have kids except for Georgie here. So yeah, so it's always just kind of something, it's definitely been, a learning for me, but I will tell you right now, I wouldn't change a thing about not about being from Iowa. I love being from Iowa. I mean, I was homesick to the point where I told my husband, I was like, we need to go home. And by home, I mean Iowa. I do love this state. I do love my hometown. I don't plan on moving anytime soon, but you never know. But it's home. And, you know, the saying, home is where the heart is 110% valid. So that is my take on being a Black girl from Des Moines, Iowa. Yes, I will tell you, we are here, we exist, and we're doing great things as well. So that is all that I have for the vlog today. So if you did like this video, go ahead and please give it a thumbs up. This was fun. You know, I could have answered all kinds of different questions, but it was just really great to talk a little bit about my upbringing and where I'm from. And hopefully pique your guys' interest, because I will tell you, I have told people this like 100 times. Des Moines, Iowa, to me, is like the diamond in the rough. It is the jewel of the Midwest. And that's because there's so much to do here and people would not expect it. So, so yeah, that is all that I have for you guys. Me and, oh, George, come here. Me and George are gonna go ahead and go watch some TVs, maybe cuddle a little bit, maybe finish a book. But if you did like this video, make sure that you do give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I definitely love to have you comment on the video. Tell me a little bit about where you're from and what it's like, where, you know, what your upbringing was like and what were maybe some of the things that you went through, or maybe even just tell me about why you love your hometown so much. Other than that though, like I said, we're gonna go and probably do some reading and relaxing for the rest of the night. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope everybody has a great night, and we will see you later.